welcome to Wednesday night's narrative. We're a little late. I apologize. There's just some news going on. People, trying to test us, seeing if we can do the news as quickly as it arrives, and we'll do our best tonight. There's obviously some news from the January 6th investigation committee. There's lots of other news going on. We'll share that as we get through our starting block. And later on, Dr. Steve Hassan is back here with us tonight to continue what was a fascinating conversation on our season premiere. And this time we're going to focus exclusively on the Moonies and how they do what they do, and various other sundry things, including how the disinformation around COVID is very much built on the basis of the cults, that there's a lot of similarities between all of that disinformation that's going on and the cults. Hello, Heidi.
Hello.
We raced to the finish. Here we are. Race to the start, actually. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I think it would be really funny if the pre-show was the hour we spend leading up to the show, because boy, that would be really entertaining. We look all cool right now, but
so you think, yeah. So this is just a lot going on, and we'll bring you some other news that we haven't mentioned in these brief promos. But the biggest news today, and I'm not even going to go with the starting block music because I can't find it, to be honest. But the big news tonight is about those January the 6th investigation committee subpoenas. We had 4 of them sort of leak out last week. Not leak out, they were officially handed out. Those were interesting. They included people like Steve Bannon. This is sort of the second tier of all those people. This is that your dog?
No, that's someone else's dog.
Whose dog is that?
I don't know. That is somebody else's dog.
Oh, okay.
I can mute myself. It just stopped.
It's not your favorite dog.
Cue the gardeners. Any second the helicopters will arrive.
Well, it's the joy of living where you live. So let's talk a little bit about these committee. You've got the announcement in front of you. The press committee. The press release was put out by the committee earlier on. It has 11 names on it, as far as I can tell. And on those list is some people that we were expecting. I would say it would be a surprise if people like Amy Kramer weren't on that list. But tell us who else is on that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. They 11 new subpoenas, and they're for Stop the Steal and I think Women for America First. One of them you'll recognize, Katrina Pearson, because she has been involved in the Trump campaign. She was always on Parscale's side during various events.
Isn't she from Fox News? I feel like I've seen her on Fox News when I occasionally dabbled there. Is she a Fox Newser?
She may very well be. She's one of the women who shows up all over what we are calling now the propaganda stations and the influence stations. Yeah. And so it's not surprising. But what is surprising is, we were just talking yesterday about how there's not enough action, and we do really have this committee, and they are going after, they're subpoenaing the right people. So it's definitely a very hopeful way to start the news block.
Yeah, let's go through some of these other names. So Amy Kramer and Kylie Kramer, both part of the Women for Trump organization, America First.
Yeah, Women for America First, yes. Exactly.
And then Cynthia Chafin is a big name. I mean, she certainly is a big name. She's come up with every little aspect of this investigation. So it'll be really interesting to see what she has to say. She was the first person to submit the application, but her name was changed and other people were added to that list. But that's an interesting thing. Carolyn Wren is another interesting character. She's Kimberly Guilfoyle's sort of right-hand person, and also a bundler for one of these big Ohio maybe organized crime kind of figures. She also likes to spend a lot of money on Lindsey Graham. So that's interesting. Maggie Mulvaney, she's the cousin or the niece, of the former, what was he, the chief of staff? I can't remember anymore.
Yeah, was it Mick Mulvaney?
Yeah, Mick Mulvaney. So these are all interesting because I'll just show you a quick slide before we jump into the other news. But I've gone through this before with folk, but it's really interesting that on that application, there are a whole bunch of people directly related to the Donald Trump campaign. It's not like Donald Trump, accidentally happened upon a January the 6th rally. They created these organizations and then they funded them through the campaign funding, which is, to the tune of $2.7 or $3.7 million. And that's how, the Stop the Steal event was actually funded initially. So a lot of people believe that it was just some sort of like grassrootsy thing. Not so much. It wasn't really like that at all. So and I'll try to get to this slide here. I'll show you this quickly. Oh, it's that kind of day. It's that kind of day when and the big news happens. Who else is on this list? Do you have any other
Oh,
names
it
that we can
means
read?
it's going to be great.
Yeah,
Justin Caporal, I don't know him. Tim Unes or Unes, Megan Powers,
Megan
Hannah
Powers is a name.
Salem,
Yeah.
Lyndon Brentnell, and that brings us down to Katrina Pearson.
So
I
they
love how you just have been doing this so long that you just know these people off the top of your head.
Oh yeah, I've dug into these people. They're like my good friends now. These it's really interesting that this is sort of the organizational bench. Really, these are the people who pulled it all together,
Mhm.
and there's all sorts of conflicts of interest. If you look here at the Open Secrets diagram, you can see that there's all sorts of money flowing in and out of the Trump campaign that should not have been flowing in and out. You could argue there were campaign finance. Um, um, what do you call those? I can't remember.
Violations.
Violations. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that Nick Mulvaney's there, and that sorry, that his niece is there, and
Mhm.
she was the ex finance director of operations at Trump. So this is what we're saying here is a lot of these same people that are currently being called to testify in front of the committee are actually people that work directly with Trump on the Trump campaign. So it's not like these are
And
just ordinary folk out there that are part of these organizations. These are intimately linked. They all jumped from the Trump campaign to organizing the Stop the Steal rally. It was almost a continuous job. So when you're looking for culpability, and I know this committee is looking for culpability, they're going to go directly to Donald Trump in this. If you look at these names, my gut says that they are after Donald Trump, and there's no doubt about it because these are the people who work directly with him in figuring out when they were going to set this up and how they were going to set this up. So it's a pretty big deal that they've listed these people. Another
it's
interesting little
really
fact.
interesting. It's really interesting too that we've said this before that Trump is like a mob boss where there's no emails,
Mhm.
there's no text messages. So that is going to be the issue. But Jen Taub, who we had on yesterday, said all we need is one more Michael Cohen, and I think
There's
that's the
there's about
mantra.
7 Michael Cohens in this list. I'm telling you, none of these ladies are going to jail. They're not interested in jail. They're they very well heeled, very successful people, and they are not interested in going to jail for Donald Trump. I can tell you that right now. Interestingly enough, a lot of the money for Women for Trump came from
Oh,
Sheldon Adelson.
our dearly
Yeah,
departed Sheldon.
yeah, so that's where all the real bankrolling came for Amy Creamer's organization and Ann Stone. I'm surprised he's not on this list because former wife of Roger Stone was also part of this
Mm.
organization. So interesting that she's not here. I wonder why the Stones get off all the time. All right, so that's that news story. What else do we have today? There's big news on the Alpha server that happened earlier on today. I am not going to go into the details of this case except to tell people that that mystery that we all were focused on in January of was January of 2017 or maybe late 2016 around that Alpha server in the Trump Towers. This is the server that was connected to Alpha Bank in Moscow. There was lots of communication back and forth. It was also connected to the Spectrum Health Company in Idaho. That's where the DeVos family are not. They don't own it. Well, they do own it.
The
But
Spectrum Health.
yeah, they do own it.
Yeah, that's a family business.
But she's not part of the business herself, Betsy. It's her husband that owns the business per se. I mean, that's just if we're parsing, and we
Sure.
sometimes parse. So I think this is also a really interesting story because you'll remember that Robert Mueller came out and said there is no big deal. There's no real story around the Alpha server. He said that it was investigated and nothing really happened. Well, according to this lawsuit, that's not really the case. It was investigated
Mhm.
um, by Donald Trump's IT guy, and the results were not really conclusive. But in
Mhm.
reality, this lawsuit is suggesting that there is much more to the Alpha server than meets the eye. And that could be that there was what I first reported in, must have been April 2017, that they were washing data from the various campaigns and the various databases that they have and cross referenced them with the Spectrum database and the Heartland credit card database to build this incredibly rich database for all the voters in America. And that's how they got to them. So,
and where I think you're right is that when you look at that lawsuit, the Intel guys who are doing the investigation are saying we cannot reveal the details of the investigation because the Alpha Bank folks will use that as weaponized information. So
right.
clearly, there's
There's a
something.
there, and it makes me ask a question about Robert Mueller that I'm not ready to ask now, but it's certainly worth thinking about Robert Mueller and why such an esteemed prosecutor and investigator would trust the word of Donald Trump's IT
Trump's
guy on
IT
this
guy.
guy. I mean, I wouldn't trust that guy to like install cable for me. But there you go. Let's do some other quick news. There's so many other things to do, but let's do one more story. What else should we
Yes.
do? You
One
pick
or
here.
two. Oh my God, I love them both. I want to do just a quick update on the disinformation doctors getting their comeuppance. We've
Mm,
got some real activity there. And maybe I can also, just in the same breath, give you the quick update on the Epic hack. But bottom line is, on this show a few weeks ago, we had Dr. Nick Sawyer and Nelson. They had announced on our show their no license for disinformation website. Since that time, anti-vax doctors were banned from YouTube. That's a major headline that just came out. And then yesterday, The Intercept reported that an anonymous hacktivist group went into the America's Frontline Doctors
wow.
website and found out they got 2 months of detailed information and found out that this anti-vax faction in America that has been literally, we've said on the show, killing people, are profiteering. They've
I'm not
made
surprised to hear that
$6.7
at
million.
all. But I am surprised that
Yeah,
it's $6.7 million in like 2 months,
two
wasn't it?
months. Yeah.
This is insane. I mean, these guys are lying through their teeth about COVID, and they're profiting off it. And it's a little late, frankly, YouTube and everybody else. But if we had any role in doing that, and Heidi, your reporting in particular had anything to do with that, that's incredible. And it was so good that Anne and Nick were here on the show to spread the word about that and to highlight what's going on. We'll talk a little bit more about Denise Gold a little later in the
You
show.
mean Dr.
Dr.
Simone Gold?
Simone Gold,
Yeah.
yes, not Denise. So it is
Yeah.
that kind of show.
Yeah.
I have lots to say
Yeah. We're
about her,
finding
so
out
we'll
more and more.
get into that maybe with Dr. Hassan in a little bit over here. And then one last thing, tell us a little bit about the Epic hack.
Just one last line. The Epic hacktivist, essentially, there was a hack that occurred where there was a ton of data revealed. It was revealed that it was from according to their own CEO, it was just, he minimized the amount of damage. Well, basically what just happened is they actually got a full bootable image of Epic's administrative server. So it's basically double the original information. And from what I understand, folks involved in Anonymous who grew up being traumatized by a lot of the video they were seeing are essentially using their skill set to go after those who are putting out alt-right, neo-Nazi, anti-vax, Holocaust denialism. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this.
What was that movie in the 80s where the nerds sort of one got revenge? It feels a little like that. That's really
Hackers, I
interesting.
think.
The Epic hack is going to be a big story, continues to be a big story, as is the Oath Keepers hack. We'll keep an eye on both of those here on Narrative. It seems like the
Yes.
tables are turning a little bit in this information war, and it's really going to be interesting to see what
One
comes
10
out.
second thing on the Oath Keepers, Zev, which I
Mm.
think is important for our viewers, is that the Oath Keepers hack, this militia hack, Little Green Men revealed 160 current US military and government emails. And I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah, that really is the big story, is how many military members, current serving military members, were part of the insurrection on January the 6th. That's going to be something we find out very, very shortly. We're going to take a break, and also very, very shortly, we're going to talk to Dr. Steve Hassan, who's here back with us for a second appearance because he has so much to say we couldn't fit it into one show. He wrote the book about the cult of Trump, but he's also a former Moonie, and he's got lots of things to say about what they're doing right now around the world. And that comes up next on Narrative. Hey folks, it's Zev. Thanks for supporting Narrative. Here's a question. Why are 97% of the chicken served in the US dipped in chlorine? Yes, chlorine. Well, it's simple because big food doesn't have the same quality standards as the family farm. That's why you need moinkbox.com. With Moink, you get the highest quality meat you've ever tasted while supporting real family farms. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and wild-caught Alaskan salmon direct to your door, helping family farms become financially independent outside of big agriculture. Their animals are raised outdoors, their fish swim wild in the ocean, and Moink meat is free of antibiotics, hormones, sugar, and all the other junk you find prepackaged in the meat aisle. I love Moink, and I know you will too. Moink meat is so delicious. If you want to get the absolute best quality while supporting the little guy, I recommend you get to Moink right now. Join the Moink movement today. Go to moinkbox.com/narrative. And listeners to this show get free bacon for a year. That's 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time only. Spelt Moink, M-O-I-N-K. That's moo and oink together. Moinkbox.com/narrative. N-A-R-A-T-I-V. That's moinkbox.com/narrative. And there you go. Now you know all about Moink. Steve, it's first time for that. Look who's here. Dr. Stephen Hassan, the celebrated author of the Cult of Trump. Let's show everyone the book cover here. And also a former member of the Moonies, but more importantly, also a doctor in his own right for being just a brilliant guy. And Steve, it's great to have you back here, if I can call you Dr.
Thank
Hassan.
you, and thank you for the compliment.
Last time you were here, I had so many questions. Heidi had so many questions. We got so stuck in all the other news that we were doing. We thought it would be great to have you back. And now there's more news. So we'll talk a little bit about the news in a bit. But we wanted to share with you that this hour is going to be a little bit like last time. We're going to try cram as much as we can into the show. But
great, and thanks for putting up a slide of the book, which people are still reading.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
Everything was correct. And in fact, I predicted that Trump would either try to do a false flag incident to stay in power or do some type of violent thing to try to stay in power if he didn't win the second election. And that's what's happened.
It's kind of amazing to me that the base, or whatever you want to call them, his followers, haven't really shifted away from him. Like, there really hasn't been a decline in support for him that we can tell. 70 million.
I think there has, for sure, but not enough.
70 million
we
Americans
need at least
are still
20,
not vaccinated.
30 million more people to wake up and
Yeah.
realize, smell the coffee, so to speak.
I equate the 70 million people who aren't getting vaccinated as, potentially in his base. But of course, that's not accurate because there are all sorts of people who don't want to get vaccinated. But there are many in his base. And we've been reporting a little bit about how the organizations like the one that we just mentioned now, Simone Gold's organization, what's it called?
America's Frontline Doctors.
Right.
Yeah.
How they've been, actively lying to people, encouraging them to not get vaccinated. And now in their latest iteration, they're telling people to homeschool so they can bankrupt the public school system. I mean, these are criminal acts. I believe they're criminal acts. I mean, if you're going to go out on stage and tell people that, total lies that may kill them, that seems to me like a criminal act. And yet, I don't know if these people are doing it for Trump or they're doing it for other people. Do you know if they're doing it for Trump?
If you're asking me, I think that my thesis for the book still holds true, that the cult of Trump is comprised by many, many other authoritarian cults with their own heads, leaders, many of them claiming to be apostles or prophets and getting direct revelations from God. And they're following their pastor, not Trump. And they got into a bit of a bind, because if you're claiming to be a prophet, according to the Bible, if you make a prophecy and it doesn't come true, the Bible says to kill the person, like stone them to death.
Right.
But in this case, because they prophesied Trump would win by a landslide in 2020 and he didn't, they're in a bind. So the only way to keep people faithful is to say Biden cheated and he stole the election. That's the only way out of that one.
Yeah, it's true.
And they're using that narrative to try to say we need to do a violent insurrection, to reinstall the correct president, right?
Yeah.
So it's still a very precarious,
You wrote a column
problematic
about
time.
this where you spoke about the, you know, identifying a fear is one of the things that you went through when you were first part of the Moonies, or introduced to the Moonies. And you told this interesting story in that column, and maybe you can share it with everybody about the movie.
Sure. So, yeah, I was asked to do an opinion piece for CNN, and it just ran today. And I actually originally wrote one that talked about my 3-step phobia cure, but they had requested something on COVID and misinformation, so they really didn't like the psychotherapy approach. So that we wound up talking about the 3 kinds of lying that is part of the playbook of authoritarian cults. That is outright lying, withholding information that's vital, or distorting it to make it palatable. So we went through all 3 and applied it to the anti-vax groups. And I do, people who've been researching it talk about Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, ISIS, and other bad actors, including Americans, former intelligence officials, who are pushing this COVID is a hoax narrative. Why? Because authoritarians, in order to take power, want chaos. They want the existing institutions to fail, and so that they can take over. So to go back to answering your question, and I apologize for the tangent. So what my piece talked about is phobias, and how phobias are irrational fears versus a real fear where there's actual danger. And I shared the story that I experienced directly in the Moon cult in 1974, where Moon ordered hundreds of members to go see in Greenwich Village the Exorcist movie. We watched it. I was scared out of my mind.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 19 in 1974.
Oh, wow.
I had been recruited earlier that year. My girlfriend dumped me. 3 women flirted with me. It's one of the oldest tricks for recruitment into intelligence groups and cults, to have somebody, feigning attraction, or try to get the recruit to fall in love with you, suck them in, and then disappear.
Do you think? I mean, did they know that you had broken up? Like, did they target you as sort of a,
They didn't know it until they asked if they could sit at my table, and we got into a conversation. And recruiters are experts at asking questions in innocuous ways.
Right.
And back then there was no internet where people could scrape your private data and know everything about you to know how to manipulate you. Back then you had to elicit it from the mark or the person you were trying to recruit. Right. But just to finish the story, we were brought to see The Exorcist. We all got in the vans, went to the headquarters in Tarrytown, which is where Moon would give in-person talks with a translator. And he proceeded to say, God made The Exorcist. This movie was a prophecy of what would happen if you leave the Unification Church. Now, this nice Jewish boy from Queens, and I should say I grew up 1.3 miles from Donald Trump in Flushing, Queens. I mean,
talk about nice Jewish boy from Queens. Look at this photograph.
Didn't believe in Satan, didn't believe in heaven or hell.
Yeah.
But in the cult, I was programmed to believe all these invisible entities were trying to invade me, to take me away from the Messiah, Sun Myung Moon, because God wanted to restore America back to the original plan of the Garden of Eden, where there would be peace and love and kumbaya. And it was at that moment, the ultimate authority figure, Moon, at least ultimate in my mind, because I was programmed he was the greatest man in human history, 10 times greater than Jesus or Moses or Buddha or Muhammad, any other religious leader, says that God made The Exorcist movie, not Hollywood. You believe him. And so it was at that point that I had such a fear to even allow a doubt in my mind.
It was The Exorcist. And they're using the same kind of idea now by introducing all these other fears.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So the videos, the social media messaging, using all kinds of sophisticated social psychological techniques, including embedding images, maybe subliminals. I'm waiting for some intelligence officials with the capability to analyze it to speak publicly about that. But they're programming people, because I watch a lot of those, especially when I was in my active research of QAnon. And if you don't know better, because they intersperse truthful things, right? Good, effective propaganda isn't just all lies.
Yeah, you need some truth.
They like to quote famous people. They like to talk about generalizations that are true, etc. And then they like to slip in, an unverified presupposition here or there. And then they build a case where at the very end, if you stick with it, you come out converted.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Just go back to what you were saying earlier on about.
It's your show.
I know, I know.
And
but
Heidi can too.
This is amazing. Heidi can ask questions too, of course. She will.
I
lots. I just have this. How did you get from 3 women in a restaurant or wherever you were to believing that Reverend Moon was God? I mean, there's a journey there that seems quite long and maybe also. It's a hell of it's a lot of indoctrination. How does that happen?
I'll tell you, but I have a request.
Okay.
Don't call him Reverend Moon when you're talking to me, because he's not a reverend. He never went to seminary. I was a reverend in the Moonies,
right?
Because Moon said I was.
Yeah,
You're a reverend now.
You get to become one.
It's just. It gives him an authority that he never deserved. The guy was a convicted felon who served time for corruption and conspiracy to evade taxes.
So what's the way to refer to him then? What should I refer to him?
Moon, or Korean cult leader Moon, or felon Moon. But just do me a favor and don't call Sean Moon Reverend either, because he's not. He was as much a reverend as I was when I was.
He certainly doesn't look like a reverend to me. He doesn't act like one. Not even close.
It's an absurdity. It's like somebody saying they're a doctor, and I got a PhD, so I can actually be called a doctor legitimately. It's like calling someone who's a doctor when he didn't do the work.
It's like calling me a doctor, and I didn't.
He's not a reverend. Anyway,
so tell us how you got there. Yeah.
I have a very interesting story. I'll try to condense it, but I do have it in chapter 2 of Combating Cult Mind Control, which I put up for free on my website because everyone wants to know more details. But essentially, I was an upper junior at college. I was a creative writing major. I was writing poetry and short stories. I was working as a banquet waiter at the Holiday Inn in Hempstead, Long Island. And so when I met the women and they invited me over for dinner to meet their friends, they started talking about how we're going away for the weekend and I have to go. And I kept saying, I work on the weekends. I'm a waiter. I do banquets. That's how I pay my bills. I need gas money, right? I'm 19 years old. No. You don't understand. The weekend's going to be so great and incredible. Anyway, after several days, there's a picture of me like at 150 pounds, like I'm 185, right? But that was me like fasting for 7 days at a time with 2 women.
You're an easy mark for them. I mean, look at you. You're just like...
and I had recruited those 2 women into the cult.
Oh, really?
Successful
wow.
recruiter. Anyway, they kept pressuring me and I made the mistake of saying, as me with the hair, that's what I looked like when I was being recruited. It was February of 74, the same month as Patty Hearst was abducted by force.
Oh, wow.
I might add, from her apartment.
It's a good time to join a cult. Yeah.
In any case, so they just kept on me, and I made the mistake of saying, "Listen, don't keep repeating this. I can't go. If by some chance, some weekend, I don't have to work, I'll go." That was my mistake. Because 2 days later, I called my boss. I said, okay, when am I coming in? Because sometimes it was a Friday night gig, Saturday morning, lunch, dinner, Sunday. He said, you won't believe it. The weddings were called off. Take the weekend off.
Oh, wow.
So I had what's called a moment where I went, I gave my word. I'm a man of my word. I don't really want to go. And then, that part of your mind goes, well, maybe there's a bigger purpose in this. Maybe I'm
Right.
supposed to go because they
Right.
seem so nice and
Yes,
they were
3 of
so
them.
emphatic. So that got me to the isolated retreat where I was sleep deprived and lied to. And there was lots of techniques of manipulation, including hypnosis, I believe.
So
And
those active events that were indoctrinating,
it was
brainwashing
a
events.
3-day workshop.
Yeah, and they were
And
brainwashing
they
you.
tried to get me to a 7-day workshop that started the next morning. And I rebelled and I said, I'm a college student. I missed class. I need to go back, and I got angry and they had to release me because I got so angry. But I was programmed at that point. And I'm going to give your listeners a Mooney moment. So at the end of a 3-day workshop where you're overloaded, sleep deprived, and your brain is like mush, the lecturer, and I'm not going to do the whole voice thing, but the lecturer says something like, so we've been covering a lot of very deep things for the last 3 days. And there's probably a part of you that's saying, what if it's all rubbish? But on the other hand, Zev,
Yes.
what if?
But
What if?
it's real.
What if it's true?
Yeah.
Could you walk away from the Son of God? Right? So they're putting this what if in your head, and you're thinking, even if there's 1 in 10,000 chance that the world's going to get saved and this mess that exists.
Yeah.
And remember, the 70s, we were still in Vietnam.
Right. It was
I
a
was
rough
in
time.
the last draft lottery, all kinds of corruption that continues to this day. So the bottom line was that they got me enough that when I got home, my parents were like, where have you been? We were so worried. Of course, there were no cell phones. And they said, you look like you're on drugs. I said, I don't think they gave me any drugs. My mother said, let's go talk to the rabbi. I said, sure. And the rabbi was useless. And what he should have said to me, and I teach clergy people around the world. I say, if somebody is asking you a question about a group you don't know anything about, say something like, you know what? If a group is legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny.
Right.
So take a time out and do some independent research. And I'm willing to do it with you because, again, there's no rush. Don't allow yourself to be pressured to get into something that you don't know fully who it is, what they believe, what's expected of them, etc.
We all fell for that, though. I mean, it's not, not just you. The media covered Moon's weddings, these mass weddings that they had. They still, covered Moon in terms of the religion. We saw Donald Trump, or the cult, sorry. We saw Donald Trump, addressing their whatever it was, a little festival they had.
The think tank
on September 11th. Yeah.
With the former head of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon.
Yeah.
And Trump was saying how wonderful Mrs. Moon was and what a scholar, Dr. Moon.
Yeah.
She's no doctor. She paid $30,000 for her doctorate as an honorary doctorate, right? But he gave this, nice talk. I'm curious how many millions they paid him to do it.
It must have been a fortune. I mean, maybe not. It might be quite cheap.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said it might be quite cheap. That's all. You can keep going.
No, so the only reference I had, and I brought out a couple of show and tells.
Oh, great.
I knew you wanted to talk about it. This is a book that most people have never heard of. It's by the, is it in the frame?
Yeah, let me get you a better framing here. Give me 1
head
second.
of staff of the Congressional Subcommittee investigation into the Moonies and the KCIA.
The Gifts of Deceit.
Expert. Yes.
It's good. Sounds good title.
Yeah. And I had just been deprogrammed from the Moonies, and I brought out all of the internal documents of Moon's speeches about saying that democracy was satanic and we have to infiltrate the congressmen's and senators' offices so we can manipulate them and on.
I mean, that's the
I
interesting
gave it
thing
all
about
to,
this cult. It's a political cult. It wasn't political just in Korea. It was political in America. It came after Nixon. It came, it came after the Republicans. They were targeting them.
so circle back. So I
Yeah.
have one more
Yeah.
show
Oh,
and
yeah. Go.
tell.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize. The
This
divine
is
principle.
my copy of the Bible, what's called the completed Testament in the Moonies. It's
Yeah.
greater than the Old Testament or the New Testament. And it basically tells you why Moon is the Messiah, except it's full of BS, essentially. So very briefly, because this is a long story, but
But we
what
have
people
time,
need
so
to understand is the Moonies have never gone away. I have a list on my website recently updated of 70 pages, single spaced, of front groups, like you were showing a graphic of different front groups that Trump set up
yeah,
and put people in.
yeah.
The Moonies were experts for decades. And so one minute we would be doing something for Jews, the next one for Muslims, the next thing for women, the next thing anti-trafficking. It was all the same group. And that's what the congressional investigation found out. They said there are all these interlocking companies and organizations and businesses, but they're essentially one thing.
Sounds
And
like a mob
so they said it's
organization.
called the Moon Organization.
Yeah.
They didn't even want to say Unification Church because that was one
Piece
front
of it.
in the religious sphere of this multi-billion-dollar international enterprise.
We're
But
going to
what
go into a lot of
happened?
that later on as well with all the OAN and Washington Times. It's really
Well,
interesting
exactly.
how widespread their assets are.
Exactly. So I got out of the Moonies. I gave over the speeches. I answered all their questions. I naively thought the congressional investigation would shut down the cult, like they didn't know all about them. Later, this man, Robert Betcher, said, George, where is this?
There you go.
It's a little
There you go.
reverse.
You're in.
George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA during this investigation. He personally told me that Bush did everything possible to undermine the investigation. And essentially, I think it was 18 days after the final report, Jonestown happened, and Leo Ryan was assassinated. He was on the committee investigating the Moonies and the Korean CIA. And
let me add a little nugget for you. You might have not even known this, that Bill Barr was Bush's chief of communication, or whatever you want, for the Congress. So he was the one running everything the CIA had to do with the Congress. So I believe
that's
that
really
Bill
interesting.
Barr may be the person, I'm just guessing, is spitballing a little bit, that he may be the one who helped Bush bury that investigation. He was known, even back then, as the cover-up general.
The fixer.
So, the fixer. So
the fixer.
And he also covered up Robert Hansen, the
Yep.
biggest FBI Russian spy of all time. He minimized his Opus Dei involvement, which was extreme Opus Dei.
Oh, yeah.
Hansen, that he totally
He covers up a lot of
sidestepped.
things. He covered up Iran-Contra. He covered up what was a few,
The
Trump.
Moonies
He
were
covered up
involved
Trump.
with Iran-Contra too, Zev, by the
They
way.
were not. Oh,
Oh,
really?
100%.
Oh,
Funding it, Washington Times, North.
right.
Absolutely. They were part of the World Anti-Communist League. So let me just tell you what the origin story of the Moonies, and you'll get it. I hope you'll get it. And again, I put this all in my book, combating book.
Yeah.
So Steve was invited to D.C. by then Senator Bob Dole. After Jonestown, they were going to have a hearing about cults. So I was asked to speak. A survivor of Jonestown was asked to speak. I fly down to D.C., and there are people picketing with signs, elect Bob Dole president, repeal the First Amendment. This is a religious witch hunt, yada, yada, yada. Then I'm told, you're off the program, Steve.
Wow.
The ex-Jonestown and then I went, there's something fishy here. And then I went and I read all 11 volumes of the investigation, which had the transcripts, which included the founder of the Korean CIA, who said under oath that he, quote, organized and utilized the Unification Church for use as a political tool.
What does that mean? Does it mean he started it, or does it mean he
No, it means
used...
it was in existence,
Yeah.
but they wanted a proxy group
Right.
as a front
Yeah.
to do re-education programs like that China had been doing in the 50s to counter North Korean brainwashing. They wanted to do Western brainwashing to stabilize South Korea. And it was only later that some brilliant person, and that's in quotes, from the CIA or whatever, said, let's bring them to the United States to counter all the lefties on college campuses that are trying to get us to leave Vietnam.
That's so interesting.
So
I thought the
that's
CIA
where I
wasn't
was
allowed to operate
recruited
here.
on campus.
Yeah. All right.
Right?
That's interesting.
So the point is, a lot of Trump supporters are angry at the deep state, the loaded term for the intelligence community, right?
Yep.
What they don't understand is this
They are the
is
deep
a
state.
black op
Yeah.
of our intelligence, but every other major country does black ops too, and uses proxy groups to fight wars in places so they can say it wasn't us.
Yeah, of course.
But in fact, I was programmed to die on command or kill on command. I was literally told by Moon that if North Korea invaded South Korea, the Americans, including me, would be sent to the front lines to die. So the Americans would come in and militarily and defend South Korea.
Oh, that's
And I
interesting.
said,
So you're going to be
yes,
used as
father, great father, sure, we'll do it, father, yay!
So you were basically told you were going to be sacrificed at the border, so the Americans would come and. That's amazing. I didn't know that at all. Didn't Moon originally start off being supportive of North Korea? Did he start off?
He was born in North Korea. Yeah. And here's another little nugget. Yeah. This is the other Bush presidency, the younger Bush. When it was, remember his axis of evil, and he said North Korea was the axis of evil. Mm-hmm. So I organized the first group of ex-Moonies, so I did a newsletter, and I was like, people need to know about this. This is really evil. This is brainwashing and mind control cults stuff. This is bad news, right? Anyway, God, I just lost my train of thought.
Bush. It was about the nugget on Bush, Bush Jr.
Well, there were two things. You were organizing your counter offense with ex-Moonies. Mm. That was the first thing you were saying.
Oh, yeah. So the younger Bush says axis of evil. And I'm hearing about the Moonies setting up a car factory in North Korea, a hotel in North Korea. So I go to my congressman, then Barney Frank, in his office. I say, and Barney was willing to sponsor, by the way, a cult awareness day on November 18th in honor of Jonestown and in honor of Leo Ryan's assassination, never passed. But anyway, I said, Barney, how could we be allowing the Moonies to do stuff in North Korea if they're the axis of evil? He said, I'll get back to you. And then like a month later, he said, special dispensation, Steve.
Whatever that means. Interesting.
Yeah. So was the intelligence community using the Moonies to build bridges with the North Korean leadership? Very Probably. Plausible to me.
Very plausible. I mean, that's how you do things if you're an intelligence organization. It's just so surprising, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, but how close they are to the president or the former president of the United States. That seems to me like a
so back to Trump and being paid. So George Bush, who tried to block this investigation, was given $2 million for one speech by the Moonies after he left the presidency. So I figure, with the years and inflation, maybe they paid Trump $4 million or $5 million for a 5-minute endorsement because they have endless amounts of money.
from the CIA of all places. Heidi, I've been talking so much and
Oh my
captivated by all of
gosh.
this. So jump in
I'm
here,
like
and also what the
stuffed
viewers
full
have
of
to add. Yeah.
questions. One thing is, didn't Bush Senior have a little something to do with the CIA? You know, wasn't
He
there a
was the
little?
director.
He was the head of it.
I know.
No, he was the
Anyway, so
director, and he blocked the
yeah.
investigation because the CIA was doing an op and they don't want people to know about it. And how can a convicted felon own and operate a newspaper in our nation's capital without some very powerful people
Right.
protecting it?
And we're talking about post Watergate here, aren't we?
Yeah.
100%. Oh,
So
and by the way, I fasted for Nixon
oh,
for 3
we're
days
going to
on the
get there. We're going
Capitol
to get there.
steps.
I've got
Yeah.
pictures and everything. But first, Heidi, let's keep going with some of the questions here that from
Oh
you or from
my
the audience. But there's so
gosh.
much more to come. That's really
There's
exciting.
so much more to come, and we'll probably be unfolding these. But of course, the burning desire, which we can either deliver a little bit of now or include more at the end, the burning desire is people need help dealing with their MAGA relatives, how to undo their programming. They're looking for tips. They're absolutely desperate. And so we can either offer a few words of advice
good.
now so, you know, people can get some relief, or we can build up to
Let's do it.
that.
Let's do it now. I think people really want to know.
Well, let me start by saying when I first got out of the Moon cult, I couldn't call it a cult for months. It was too embarrassing. And I was sure I wasn't brainwashed, but I agreed to the deprogramming just to prove my family wrong. And fortunately, I woke up. and I was willing to eat crow and go and cry and just say, I'm so sorry that I put you all through this. And, you know, I
How
was
long was
so
the deprogramming?
Huh?
How long was the deprogramming?
5 days.
5 days.
But it followed 2 weeks away from the cult where I had nearly died in a van crash due to sleep exhaustion.
Right.
So that's what primed me to call my sister, even though I was under orders not to tell my family where I was. But lesson number one about mind control, it's not 100%. It doesn't erase your brain. Anyone who has a loved one in a cult who's given up hope and says they'll never leave, you're wrong. You're just plain wrong. And I have a blog with a man who was in the Moonies for 36 years. He got involved when I was in. He left there a number of years ago. People will leave, but there are things that we can do within our control to open doors, to plant seeds, to undo phobia indoctrination. Why? Because the thing about mind control, brainwashing, thought reform, coercive control, all of these terms basically refer to undue influence. The patterns are all the same, pretty much. Not the ideology, but in my model, which I call the BITE model of authoritarian control, it stands for behavior control components, information control, thought control, and emotional control components. And on my website, there's a list like sleep deprivation, change clothes, change diet, report everything, rigid rules. So there are lists under each one of these.
This is not this list, right? This is
so this isn't. Keep that one up because the BITE model is what you use to apply with the influence continuum.
Okay.
The more behavior is controlled, where you're dependent and obedient, the more you are on the destructive, unhealthy side. And if you're asked to use your conscience, think for yourself, love-based, you can leave without threats or coercion, you're in a healthy cult. Because I do think cults are on a continuum all the way across the top.
Makes sense.
The critical thing I want to say is this dual identity at the upper right. It says false cult identity. And the easiest way to explain it to your listeners is I was Steve Hassan, son of Milton and Estelle Hassan. I got into the Moonies. Now I'm the son of Sun Myung Moon and Hak Jahan, the true parents of the universe, believing that Milton and Estelle were just my physical parents because they were satanic. And it was this cult identity that suppressed the real Steve, but did not erase the real Steve. And people leave cults because their real self is still in there. But the most important thing is having family, friends, and caring outsiders who are willing to respectfully engage, develop rapport and trust, ask non-threatening questions. And there are rules, and I've written a whole book called Freedom of Mind on the techniques, but I've also done a ton of blogs on Trump, MAGA, QAnon. And the rules are: you never attack the leader, the doctrine, or the group head on.
Mhm.
You never
Makes
try to
sense.
just persuade them with facts, because it initiates the phobia programming. It triggers the thought stopping techniques that members are taught to do on themselves. And it alienates them from you because they feel like you're persecuting them. So the art is really learning about another group that they think is a cult, talking about mind control there,
Right.
engaging
Right. Makes sense.
actively first,
Makes
going
sense.
through the patterns, and then asking. The other critical thing is, the most powerful technique is asking a good question and being quiet while the person thinks about it, and giving long, long, long silences. Most people who've blocked their loved ones, cut off from them, got to a point where they felt so upset and overwhelmed, and they were given 60 links of things and told to
Right.
do your research because I've done mine. And that is the Putin brand of, fire hose propaganda. Just like
Right.
throw so much spaghetti against the wall until the person surrenders or runs away. And that's what most family members and friends are like, stop.
But you're
I
saying
can't.
that's not the right approach. Do not cut people off. You got to stay engaged.
Never
You got
cut
to,
off, but you
yeah.
can say, I respect you. You're intelligent. You're my brother. You're my sister. You're my uncle. You're my aunt. I don't understand how you believe what you believe, but I'm giving you my word. All I want is to know what's true
Right.
and what's factual. So let's make a deal. I'm willing to be open-minded. You pick one thing that was important in your conversion that made you believe this. Let's watch it together or read it together, discuss it. Then it's my turn to give you one thing to discuss, and
That's
you
really
agree to
nice and respectful.
reciprocate.
Yeah. Right. I like that a lot. That's a nice arrangement. And then so you each have a chance to say, have your piece and discuss something objectively.
And the thing is, and I'm going to plug someone else's book because I love it so much.
Sure.
Think Again by Adam Grant.
Mm-hmm.
He's an organizational psychologist, and in his book, which is absolutely brilliant, he basically says, you know what, disconnect your beliefs, from your identity, and just adopt a I want to know what's true frame,
Right.
and be ready to change your mind and seek out alternative points of view to test your current beliefs to see whether or not you need to change anything.
Yeah, you might be in a cult without knowing it.
Yeah, and I'm accused all the time by
Yeah.
Trumpers that I'm in the cult of the libtards or George Soros or whatever, and I'm like, really? I'm so curious. Tell me what you understand is brainwashing.
Wow.
I
That's really
thought I
interesting.
knew what it was, but please enlighten me. And then they have nothing else to say, right?
Right.
Because they were just given that
They give you the
level.
one line.
Yeah,
You
the
do.
one
I've been
liner.
in conversations with people about vaccinations, and they are anti-vax, and I don't, there are valid reasons to argue that, I think, but it's, it's not sensible. It doesn't make sense in my world. But when you confront them, they immediately come back at you with, "Oh, you're just one of those, liberals, or you're one of those deniers, or whatever, whatever the word they want to use about you." And then,
So
Blue
what I
Anon.
want to add, if I
blue
may,
and
is
I
just,
get that. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's great. So the influence continuum, it's not left and right. It's authoritarian is the bad side, and human rights and law-abiding citizens.
Right.
So when people say, oh, you only criticize right-wing groups, I say, no, I criticize a lot of left-wing groups. They can be authoritarians too.
Right.
I do interviews with former members of those too. And here's the thing with people who are Trump, MAGA, etc., they all want to learn about Chinese communist brainwashing, right? Because they're the bad guys. So they're open to that. So
Right.
I get to talk all about what I learned about Chinese communist thought reform. And they also are against traffickers and pimps, which is another area I have an expertise in.
Right.
So I talk about the BITE model as traffickers and pimps use to groom and recruit and indoctrinate people.
Right.
But the point is getting the information into their head in a way that they've accepted it in those contexts, and then asking them questions. So tell me, so in the Scientology, you're not allowed to talk to ex-members or critics. Have you ever talked to an ex-believer in QAnon? And if not, why not? I'm just curious. Are you afraid? Oh no, I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
Can I arrange an introduction for you?
So let's take this a step further, if we could. Like, let's think about this as a political campaign for the Democrats. If you were, positioning yourself as the party that's in favor of democracy and you're competing against an autocratic party, what would be your suggestion for them in terms of an advertising campaign that takes in this kind of information targeted at conservative or right wing or MAGA voters? Curveball, I know.
Thank you for asking the question. There are some things I would say publicly and other things that I've thought about that I would say privately to people who actually wanted to know strategy. But essentially what's missing, and the media has been horrible, mainstream media, everybody has been horrible, is getting experts on who can explain social psychology, who can explain, oh, here's a clip. This is called projection. This is a cognitive dissonance manipulation. This is sunk cost fallacy, where you invest in a certain course of action and even though you realize it's not going to get you to the goal, you keep doing it because you put so much into it already. The public needs to learn about how the mind works. The public needs to get over the myth of invulnerability. Oh, only stupid people get into cults. And I skipped 8th grade and I was an extra honors student. So I could never be in a cult.
In fact, you think some more smarter people would get into cults because they're curious. They would investigate these things in different ways. And
the other part of it is the big motivations. They say, what are people's motivations, Steve, for getting involved with cults? So first of all, they don't think it's a cult when they get involved. But the motivation is typically they want to improve themselves. More self-awareness, understanding, more self-efficacy, power, etc. Or they want to make the world a better place. They want to help other people. They want to do good. Those two. Now, if you're a selfish, complacent hedonist, they're not going to get recruited by a cult. They don't want you.
Right.
They will step aside you. They want the young, and not just young, like elderly too, especially if you have money or special power. I mean, special talents for whatever. They want competent, capable, functioning people, not with mental illness, with drug addictions and other things where they have to take care of the member.
Yeah. They want people who are going to be useful to them, and they want people who are smart. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was told to recruit people at my level or higher. And I was actually yelled at because I approached a homeless man because he was not good quality.
Which is just exactly what you would not expect the church to really do. But there you go. So.
No kidding, because it's not a church.
You're right. It's not a church. We've learned that. He's not a reverend. I can't believe it's 8 o'clock already. Actually, I'm stunned that it's 8 o'clock already. But Heidi, let's see if we can fit in a couple of more questions. And then
I
Dr. Hassan
do.
Can stay with us for a little bit. That'll be great.
Great thing about having studied your work and had you on the show already is that you've given so much insight that I now feel like when I observe some of these charlatans, it's all the same tricks. It's like the whole same bag of tricks. And so what Zev and I have been putting together is we realize that they're selling fear. You have all these little fiefdoms in the major cult of Trump, and they're all selling fear for one way or another. Usually, just like you said with Felon Moon, they have some corruption, some money scam they're working on. This is kind of something that we put together. So the bottom guy you'll recognize as Todd Callender, the Bahamas-based lawyer who went down to Texas to sell fear about the vaccination, who's has this anti-vax site, promoting various drugs, and then he has ties to Russia, and then his family has a vaccine company doing a big deal in India. Right there in the center is a woman we've been tracking, Lee Dundas. She's another lawyer. She goes up and down and all over the place to try to scare people out of vaccines and masking. And she terrorizes school boards and has brought Nazi flags, and school board people have resigned because of her. The guy above there is a pastor who's been on a month-long tour in America, essentially all the same tricks, anti-vax. Of course, Trump. Dr. Simone Gold, her organization just, we said at the top of the show, just got, exposed for having been profiteering off of selling anti-vax rhetoric and then offering the drugs that they push. And of course, there's another son of felon, Moon. But we've just, we'd love you to speak on that, because it seems to me that they all are using the same bag of tricks that was done on you in 1974, love bombing people, instilling fear. And these people who show up at the school boards after they've been radicalized by these folks really seem traumatized.
Yeah, it's really true. But what's different now is the internet and AI and all of these platforms. And I'm a fan of Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Technology. And on one of his podcasts, he has a hypnotist on talking about how hypnosis is not sleep, it's focused attention, where your critical faculties are suspended. And what's happening when people are on platforms for hours after hours after hours without break is your mind goes numb.
Right.
And things start coming in. And when you have billionaires with tech abilities to mine the data, find 5,000 data points on every voting American, find which buttons to push on you, organize a group of bots as well as people to work on you for a few weeks and deliver certain content. That's how cults are recruiting now, is online.
And we mentioned the Alpha server at the top of the show. That is how Donald Trump got all that data. That's how they were able to mine the voters in the way they were able to mine it. So that's really interesting. It's all about fear, it seems. I'm so stunned by the crossover between religion and politics at these events. Like, we were watching the one with the Reverend the other day, and not a real reverend either, but maybe he is, it claims to be. There was, they were telling people not to get vaccinated while having a religious service. It was hypnotic in many ways, actually, now that you say that.
Well, a lot of these groups do audible prayers, and the Moonies did it too. And not to offend anybody, but when you're talking like this, oh, Father, please save America. America's falling apart now. Please open your hearts, open up your wallets, and donate now.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the game, the methodology, the BS prosperity ministries, which has nothing to do with Jesus Christ and the older New Testament, where you say you believe 100% and God will bless you and give you millions of dollars, which is what the scammers and MLMs do as well. This kind of believe it 100% and it's magically going to appear, right?
Yeah.
And the bigger picture is that genuine spiritual hunger, genuine spiritual desire is being manipulated and exploited by bad people.
Yeah.
People who don't have conscience, they have no empathy, they ignore the golden rule, don't do to others what you don't want done to you.
Right. They don't do that at all, that's for sure.
Let's go back to basics of being kind and loving and thoughtful and compassionate and doing good deeds and paying it forward. That's the America I want to live in.
Absolutely.
And I want to just add a quick true story. I'm in the Moonies. It's 75. It's 90 degrees in Manhattan. I'm fundraising, and I'm thirsty, and I'm hot, and I'm sweating. And someone said, "You look like you're thirsty. Can I buy you a drink?"
That's very
Now,
nice.
they're supposed to be satanic,
Right.
and they're being nice to me, and I'm thirsty, and I can't use God's money to buy myself a drink without permission from my
Wow.
leader. So I let him buy a drink. And so I was grateful, nice guy. And then he said, "When was the last time you talked with your family? Let's
Mm.
dial them up now." And I'm sure they'd love to hear. And he dialed up my house, and I talked with my mother. This was just an act of kindness from some random person.
Maybe we should
And,
all take
and
buses
people,
to
I
MAGA
want
country.
people to, yeah, I want people to
Yeah.
know people in cults are real
Ooh,
people.
I
They're
can't hear
good
anything. Keep
people,
going.
and they're even better when they get free, because our greatest national resource is our people.
That's a
And there's a
beautiful
lot of,
line.
yeah.
You said something really powerful that I want to bring up because I think it really buttons up a lot of what we work on, and Zeb and I have been working on this show, and it was that the big state actors are wanting power, money, and sex to control the world. For them, cyber warfare and psychological warfare is the 21st century nuclear arms race.
Oh yeah.
I'd
That,
love you to expound on that a little bit for our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, we rushed to do the Manhattan Project to beat Hitler to the nuclear bomb, right? And
yeah.
I've been saying, why don't we do like a version of the Manhattan Project on how to get out of the mess we're currently in? But nobody stepped up to put the funds and bring the people together to say, let's really problem solve this.
Isn't that interesting? There's always funding for the other side. It feels like there's an enormous side of
Well, there's
amount of
lots of
funding.
money for military
Yeah.
hardware,
Yeah.
but what's happened is, and the experts will say it, warfare is now in the cyber realm.
Oh,
It's
for
in the
sure.
psychological warfare realm. I happen to have been a leader in a cult that did this stuff. And I've spent 45 years learning this stuff. And I have lots of colleagues who are ex-members, and many are mental health professionals who understand the mindset and understand the kinds of things we need to do to help people to wake up. But there's resistance. Why? I have theories, like all the authoritarian cults,
Mm-hmm.
like Opus Dei, the
Mm-hmm.
family that Mike Pence was in, New
CIA.
Apostolic Reformation,
Yeah.
the neo-Nazis, the Koch industries. You can go down the
The
list of
whole
all the
lot of them. Yeah.
authoritarians.
Yeah. Speaking of authoritarians, and I'm just going to do this because we said we were going to, so I'm going to force you into asking. You were there on this day. This is
Where am I? I don't see myself.
where are you? Let's see if we'll look through some other pictures here. We don't actually see you, but you tell us you were
So
there.
that was Neil Salone in this picture.
Yeah.
And I was actually, Moon moved the headquarters from DC to Manhattan
Mm-hmm.
and made the national headquarters in Manhattan. And I was moved into the national headquarters to be an example for Neil Salone and that guy to follow, because
Right.
Moon liked my type of Mooney, because I would do whatever I was told without
Right.
question.
And look, these pictures are really fascinating to me. I actually didn't know this event took place, but this was a 3-day prayer event during Watergate. And they were basically praying for Nixon and everybody, I guess, involved in the Watergate committee hearings, but still mostly for Nixon. And these pictures are stunning to me that everyone's walking around with these. This is a Korean cult protesting for Nixon in broad daylight. I mean, it just seems so odd. It just feels like it doesn't fit in.
I was there.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you a quick story. I know we're running over, but
Yeah.
I have to tell you this
Go for
story.
it.
So my father had a hardware store that he got from his father in Ozone Park. Wanted me to take it. I didn't want to. I wanted to be an English writing person. And he voted for Nixon. I voted for McGovern. And we would fight at the dinner table, because I'd be like, Dad, how could you vote for him? He's such a crook.
Yeah.
He's so tricky dicky. Come on, Dad, wake up.
Yeah.
Like, smell the coffee, right? So I'm in the cult. They send me to DC. I'm fasting. The cult Steve goes, let me call my father. Hey, Dad, I'm in the Capitol. I'm fasting for Richard Nixon to be president. My
Isn't that?
father says, Steve, you are right. He's a crook. I said, Dad, you don't understand. God wants him to be president. He said, Steve, now I know you're brainwashed. The guy's a crook. True story.
That's a good story, actually. It's interesting that I'll just leave you with one last thing here, because you asked last time if we knew that OANN was part of the Washington Times or connected to the Washington Times organization. And the way we found out is because apparently the owner of the Washington Times, of OAN, was, we think at least, one of the people involved in this prayer event in 1970, whatever it was. And we know that it's part of the Washington Times newspaper group, because the original plan was for OANN to launch as a part of the Washington Times. It was essentially a partnership between this private company and the Washington Times to start a TV network off the back of the Washington Times. So, many years later, it still operates. Same owners. I suspect the same owners get the same money from the same Moonies as the Washington Times, because there's no real other way for these people to survive as a network. So,
I found out that James Whalen, the founding editor of the Washington Times, was a longtime Council for National Policy member.
Yes, I read the Moonies were all about that in the CNP. So
all the players are still around for decades later, and Sean Moon was at the January 6th. A couple of Moonies, I think, were arrested, and they are buying compounds to train people for Civil War with his brother Justin's gun factory.
Exactly.
It makes assault rifles.
Yeah. And Trump rifles. So there you go. Dr. Steve Hassan, thank you so much for being here tonight. Always such a pleasure to have you. I wish we would have gotten to more your questions, and I apologize. I dominated so much of the conversation, but I can't stop talking to you. There's so much good in what you're talking about, and the idea of just, being good and just and bringing kindness back to the world is such an important principle. And as nasty as this battle is going to get over the next, especially into the next elections, I think it's so important that we keep that piece of America alive, that piece of, civility, kindness, because that is really very attractive. It's way more attractive than wanting to go to vote for the other side. So thank you so much for underlining that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and I apologize if I have interrupted you a few times. One more thing I want to say that I think is going to be a positive force, which is I'm part of the I Got Out #IGotOut movement, igotout.org.
Right.
And the idea behind this is if enough people start sharing their cult mind control experiences, we can destigmatize it. If everyone starts a conversation in their communities, online and whatever, it's going to be an exit ramp for all the people who are in the cult of Trump to leave without feeling like they're dumb or stupid or ashamed or embarrassed, because other people will have told their stories, which they would hear over and over again. Different groups, different ideologies. Let's be kind to each other, please.
I love that. The Cult of Trump is the name of the book. A leading cult expert explains how the president uses mind control, by Stephen Hassan. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And Heidi, any last thoughts from you?
Just thank him so much for that kindness message. I think when we're following the grifters and the money laundering and, all the profiteering, that message is really, really profound. And the last thing I want to say is one of our viewers has a 40-year-old son. Her name is Martha, and she's devastated because he's full MAGA. You already gave some great tips. Do you have one last thought or key word for her?
Yeah, you're not alone. And if you have access to the internet, go to my website and put Trump and look at the blogs, because I give long videos and blogs explaining a lot of details. I went on a Reddit, it was QAnon Casualties, I think it was. And I answered questions for hours, and we recorded the best, the most popular, important ones. So there's a lot of material for free if you want it, and just know that there's hope. And love is stronger than mind control. I think
Mhm.
that's the line I want to end with.
That's a good
Love is
line.
stronger than it's real love isn't conditional. It's love for your beingness. Cults suck. Cults only love you if you are obedient and do what they want you to do. They don't love you the minute you question or exit.
Absolutely.
And people can feel it when they're genuinely loved.
And we really are in that, moment in history where we're all having to choose where we're going to go. And, the battle is between autocracies, which is really cults. Really, that's what it's about. That's how they build themselves. And the alternative is countries that still have, some sort of human self-determination, democracies, places where you can express yourself, people be yourself, share your emotions. And that's how it's, the battle between autocracy and democracy is the same as between being in a cult and not being in a cult. So thank you, Dr. Hassan. And thank you, Heidi. And thanks to everyone who watching at home.
Brilliant.
This was a really amazing show and we really had a good time. And we'll be back on Friday with the after show with LB and Greg. And we'll see you then. Have a good night, everybody.